Oh, hey guys. All right, so Sam back with you here mid-morning on December 5th. I've got Dash up in front of me here. This is Dash to Bitcoin on Poloniex. Now, I wanted to do this because we've got a potential trade setting up here right now. Now, this is just a good example of exactly what I look for in the market. I've got some technical significance here. So if you look at the count, we are working on the assumption that I've got a 1-2 in. All right, so if I've got a 1-2, then I'm looking for a third. Now, given that scale here on the hourly, the third is going to be much higher. Right, so if I look up above, we'd have targets on the third significantly higher. All right, so the 4 actually has to move way out of here. So even if we're just going to do 100, there's 100% of it. There's the 1-2-7-2. So the longer term targets are for a third or way up here. So the scale of this all has to get moved over. So there's your if it's going to follow, if it's going to go per that wave count, there's your target here. That's pretty enormous potential trade. So thus the risk reward, while this would be a first target here, there's the algo target, then you have the potential to let some of it run for what ends up being possibly a 25-1. So is that the turn? Is that the pivot? Well, of course we don't know, but that's certainly it plays technically. So if you put it now, just looking at that, right, knowing that we have valid technical potential here based off of that 1-2, and you look at the potential risk per the reward, that's a trade I take all day long. So again, we don't know, and it's certainly not going to go just straight up. So here's your first target, right, which would be essentially a double top here off of this one high. Here buying at the 618 with there's your negative 23. So I like this trade. So even just if you're punching out a smaller trade there, that's 8-1. Okay, because we don't need to ride this thing. While it certainly could go lower, we don't need to ride it all the way down. If it's going to break here, we'd be operating and entering that trade on the assumption that we've got a pivot that's going to hold here due to the 618, right? So that's structure. Now we're outside of the median line here, the lower parallel, but I'm willing to take that trade based on the low risk relative to the potential reward and the fact that this sets up potentially quite nicely as a 1-2. So if you look at the count, so we've got multiple 1-2s. So let me squeeze this up again so you can see it. So I wanted to get this done because the trade is right here, right now. So if, and again, we don't know, but if I've got a 1-2, it certainly sets up, if that's my 1-2, then I would be looking for subdivision into my third. So potentially I have a leading diagonal here into my one wave here of my potential third wave. Remember, the targets are much higher. So it's not unusual that I've got good subdivision here into my third. So I've got a 1, 2, 3, deep 4, acknowledge. Okay, so we're overlapping the 1, so I've got a leading diagonal. Here was the corner pocket here went right to the median line, then we caught the upper parallel. So potentially here I've got a leading diagonal, which we would expect and should not be surprised to find in a one wave. So if this is going to play ball, we've got to, knowing if it's a 1-2, it could go as deep as the 786, right? But then we're kind of potentially invalidating the whole thing if we're going to start going much lower. And granted, this isn't relative to this one. What's relative is the 2 here. That's as deep as you'd want to take it. But I look at that and go, if it's going to go that deep, this may invalidate the count. We may have something else. This may end up being some sort of if this is a 2, I might have an A, B, C. It could. This is not the prettiest 2 wave I've ever seen. It's kind of, it looks like you had a potential. It was kind of ugly. It looked like we had a potential 4th here and we didn't get it. And now we have this long trending C wave here in that 2. So it's not the prettiest 2, but I'm willing to put money at risk there given the very low potential downside. The risk reward is so good. And if I go down to my oscillators here, I've just got this long sort of sideways, it's trending lower, but we're getting, we're in the technically overbought, or pardon me, oversold zone down here. So we're getting some signs of life down here. So it's a trade to consider, primarily because of the 618 and the significant upside potential that's there. Now, given that I'm looking at this 1 hour and I've got these pivots, the other thing that is worth noting that I would want to show this to you because I did it. So looking at those 3 pivots, I'm conscious of the fact that I've got a potential median line tap down here, and or potentially over here that would synchronize with a break of the 6.5 and potentially moving down for a double bottom here at the 7.86. Can't ignore that potential, but because that's such a small amount of risk relative to the upside, and because it's certainly valid here, and we know algos will be defending at the 618. I'm willing to take that trade knowing that if I get stopped, I might look again. Should we wind our way down here to the 786 and tap the median line, I might look again for signs of life with a spark off of a tap of the median line. But right now, I'll defer to the longer-term wave count. If we do turn here, then what is that setting up? Well, we know from median line trading principles that if we're going to fail to make the median line, right, which was the assumption of this trade, right? So you can see we're getting a little reaction off the 618. Well, trading principle number 4, a failure to make the median line sets up the opportunity for a move in the opposite direction equal to or greater than the last swing. So it would be in excess from this low to this high, and then here's our negative 23. Do you see that? So we're playing that the structure here in the fib relationship with that algo target, somewhat anticipating the pivot there, which would set up for at least 100% or a move back above that pivot there, which we're currently labeling as the one wave. So that's a trade to consider. Now Dash is predominantly traded against Bitcoin. So if we go back to the exercise we did earlier, where we looked at where the volume here. So I'm over here on CoinMarketCap, and I've got Dash up here. We know this is this is a major project. This is one of the bigs. So we look here at the volume of the last 24 hours. We can see that the bulk of this is in Bitcoin, right? So here, looking here, I can see the majority is on Binance to Bitcoin. Well, there's BitHub, there's the Koreans. The HIT BTC, here's this is an exchange I don't have access to. Bitfinex, I don't have access to. I don't have an account at YoBit. Here's Bittrex, well, at least we're getting 10 million traded against Bitcoin. If I go down to US dollar Tether, well, I do trade at HIT BTC, which I like, by the way. And they've got it against the Tether, but look at the gap here. There's 4 million to 31 million. It's not until we get down here to Poloniex against the dollar Tether, where I've got at least 2 million. So we know there's some volume there, but nothing compared to what we're seeing up here in Dash to Bitcoin. So looking at it, because I've done analysis and videos on Dash, it's traded very, very technically against the dollar, but it's gotten really quite difficult against the dollar here. So if I like it here against Bitcoin, let's go look at it real quick since we're underway here. So here it is on. Let's look at it on Poloniex. So we've had this screaming move here, and it's gotten really quite difficult to get a count on it up here because of this volatility. So if you look at this, so if I go back here to my pivot low here to this, all right, so you can see we've hit the extreme algo target, and we've got the upper parallel here. So we're getting chop up here. All right, so here was from that low. All right, so from this swing low here of what potentially is the start of the last pivot here before we make this move here. Here's the 50, here's the 618, and then we come back down, we tap the 50 again. And while we do go outside of the 100% again here, here's the 200% and the 50 we seem to hold, and then here's the corner pocket, although it's an outside corner. Here's the tap back to the median line, and now we've gone to the 100%, the upper parallel to the median line. Do you see it? Right. So here's the 100, and we're getting this cluster reaction here because we've got algos, taking profit, and we've got volatility up there. So if I project, and so if you can see the count here. So if I'm working from, I've got to go back a ways here to get this. So if that's a 1, I think I've got to go all the way back. So let me scrunch a little bit so you can see this. So if this is my low here, here's my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if we're projecting, this is my absolute low to my 1, projecting from my 2. Okay, we've got some big targets up here. So here's the you can that's the box, right? So here's my hot box on that third up here. There's the most likely target, right? Statistically for a wave 3 for this wave 3 up here. Here's the 1618175 box, right? So, but here we've run into this chop here because of some of the algo targets. So if I'm not mistaken, again pulling from absolute low, the start of this to my 1. Yeah, so here's our 50, and so again we're coming up. So we've got this confluent zone up here where we've got clusters of fibs, and in conjunction with algo targets and the market's geometry giving us this volatility up here. Very hard to go to. This is an 8-hour on Polo, so very hard to get a count on it on the smaller degree. So when you can't get a clear count on it, my advice is always pull out to the larger time frames and get a sense of where you are, and if indeed we're putting in some sort of a topping formation up here, the expectation is not to try and trade in the, the idea would be not to try and trade in the midst of this chop. Wait for a more significant retracement and then get a better handle on it when you've got a pivot up here that you can work with. Right now you can just see that on the 8-hour we've got some sort of a double top action up here. So expectation is not that we're complete here, but that we're putting in the top here of this third of this in green here, 1, 2. I know it's hard to see it. Let me pull some of this off so you can get a better look at that. So even this, pulling that off. So here's my larger degree here. Here's my degree, 1 degree lower than the largest degree in blue, my 1, 2. Okay, here's my big 3. I'm looking for my 4. So the smaller degree now in green here, here's my 1, 2. Here's my 3. So we have the potential for the 4 to already be in, but I think it's likely just chop, and that we're looking for a deeper retracement, dash to the tether. So of course I would pull from my 2 to, is this my 3 top? I can't really be clear about that. I can't quite tell. So here would be, potentially a location for that 4. Right, so remember we're in the smaller degree, not this 4, because we haven't gone up to this target yet, and we don't know that we will. But right now I'm looking for this 3 and then a 4 here. So where's my likely target for it? Well, here's my median line. It's not unheard of to turn on the 23. Certainly we've seen a lot of that in crypto. Shallow retracements. So we know statistically very high probability between the 23.6 and the 38. Highest probability, this is about 15% of them, or pardon me, 20% of them here. Larger, 65% between the 38 and the 50. Right, so here's my wave 1. Pardon me, here's my wave 1 of the degree that's relative. So wave 4, this would be a shallow, even the 38 would be shallow. This would be extremely shallow, but we can't ignore the median line, given how well it's contained this move. So what I'd like to see is a push to the outside edge here, to the lower parallel relative to the median line. That's the one that I'd like to see, but as we're dealing with this chop up here, we just I don't want to try and trade in the midst of this. I'm not interested in trying to catch this. Even though, I might miss a trade and it might set up there, I'm not interested in trying to catch that because this is too much chop up here for me. I can't get a clear handle on what the hell we've got there. So, if you take it down to, where have I got it? Here it is. Here it is on the, let me take it to the 1 hour. See if I can kind of show you. So, this is just ugly. So what is that? That is very difficult to get a handle on that. So here's that upper parallel. Here's the median. Well, notice this tap to the median line. So it may be we have a 3. This is problematic here because this swing low takes out this low. So that can't be the 4. So it looks to me like we've got a 5 here of some degree. Then we've got an expanded flat into a shallow C that returns to the median line. So bottom line is, why trade that? Why try and trade that? I understand, we want to be long in crypto, but that there's too much risk to the downside for a potential 4. So here's your different scale, of course, but here's potentially the pull from the 2 to the 38. Here's the 50. So this, I don't want to try and guess what's going on in there. That's just too choppy for me. I just have no handle on this. Look at the volatility spikes here. These are, this is what gets you in trouble. Something like that, So what is it? Is this my, Do I have an A, B, C? Are we completed? Well, this doesn't look particularly good as an impulse. It's not a. Would that be a 1? It can't be, right? So if this was my 1, 2, this this can't be my 3. It's too short relative to the 1. So I could really struggle to try and get a decent count on that. So why bother, right? There's too much opportunity in other markets to try and trade that against the dollar. So I just go, okay, I'll wait until there's more clarity in the dollar. But I certainly like the look of this. So you can see now, just since I've been recording this, look at the reaction we're getting off of the 618. So does that mean that we've made a pivot there? Well, we don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me at all that we're getting a little front run off of the 618. So in the trade, off to a good start. So, that's a little soon for me to tighten up the stop on this. But I might, you could tighten it up a little bit if you want to bring, just get real tight on that. Just a few ticks on the other side of the 6.5, right? So good start to that trade. Now what do we want to see? So if that's going to be a hard pivot, and this is a 1 wave, right? So that's the assumption we're making, that we are trading off of the idea that we have a leading diagonal into a 1 wave, a very ugly C wave. A, B, again, chop here. Looks a lot like what we're seeing in that looks very much like what we're seeing over against the dollar in dash to the dollar. Right, that kind of insane, who knows where that's going. Is this the 3? Is this? I don't know what that is, but I know that I can pull back and look at it and go, okay, well, if that's correct, if that's my 1, this is a good spot to find a 2 and look at the reaction that I'm getting off of that low. So now what I want to see, so if you're not in that, or you just figure it's too late, well, I want to see some sort of impulse. Something. I'm on a 1 hour here, so I want to see that I could wait for my 2. All right, I could wait for some sort of a decent pullback. And so if we're going to go impulsive, and we don't know how far this goes from this reaction here, we don't know, but I'd like to see something impulsive and subdivide into a 5 to tell me that potentially I've got a new trend underway, and then I'm going to wait for my 2. So I'm potentially a buyer at the 50 to the 618 again. Right, so I don't sweat that, if you're not in that, don't worry about it. Right? The opportunity will come again, because if this is a 1-2, we got a long way to go higher. Right? And so we don't know that, but what I can look at is here's my 618, here's my algo target, here's my median line. And so if we're operating on the assumption that we're going to pivot here, this is the median line that matters. Right? So am I going to get it here? So you might see that, and then you might see the first pullback might be something like that. Just don't know. Right now, all I know is I've got a reaction. I've got a reaction off the 618. So that drew my eye to it. So a good one to look at, even though I prefer these. Here was the first corner pocket, a little outside here, but structurally that makes sense. So it wouldn't surprise me to see that we get some traction here, and then we get, of course you would. So here, let me just to finish up with this. So given that, we have potential for another corner pocket. So just to declutter your chart, so then you would draw it like this. If that's going to be my pivot, okay, so now look at that. So now we're working from the 3 most recent pivots. So what do I get here? I get a second corner pocket trade, right? And where's my target? Well, if I pull this off. So then here's my algo target right here. So if the algos are going to play ball here, and it looks like something was triggered to be a buyer there. So if we're going to get to the median line, well, we don't know that it takes that path. I mean, it could do this and bounce. It could, at some point. But I like the fact that I get this time element. So that right there seems, like that's a reasonable scenario to see it move in that direction based on that time frame. But again, we don't know that that's going to happen. But I like the odds play there. I like the risk reward. I mean, it may take its sweet time. We don't know when it's going to get there, but that wouldn't surprise me. And that's a pretty big move. That would be a pretty big move. Now let's put it in context. Right. So if that's my 1-2. Right, so what we're after is some sort of a double top here. So now you start to look at that and you go, well, that's 9 to 1, and that's just your first target. That's not even qualifying this as a 1-2 and potentially a 3. Here's where I have to qualify it, as I showed you earlier, right? To be a 3 relative to that 1, and then my 5 is going to be much. Come on, I hate that about TradingView. First grab, it grabs the whole structure. Okay, so that's a potential roadmap. We don't know. All I know is I got a reaction off the 618. First target, second target, third target, much higher, right, as we looked at runner, right? So if you bank some here, let some run, and look what the risk was. initially when you got into the trade. Okay, good example of just what we try and do. Okay, guys, I'll wrap there.